It is my pleasure to welcoming you. My name is Hanna Kabelka. I work as an SRHR advisor, Kidrol Tropical Institute, where I also work at SN-INT Netherlands. And I will be your moderator for today for this session. And I'm here together with my colleague, Victory Nabaru Ekeoma, and she's our tech host in the session, and she's overseeing the chat, so also feel free to reach out to her if that's useful. Yeah, warm welcome. I'm going to start shortly with introducing to you also the network for those of you who are not yet so familiar with the work that we do at SN-INT International. It is our mission to strengthen linkages between research, policy and practice through generating, sharing, translating and promoting the use of knowledge for the development of better policies and practices in SRHR, in sexual and reproductive health and rights. And one core annual activity that contributed to this at the country hub level of SN-INT Netherlands over the last 9 years was this meeting called Linking Research, Policy and Practice, that traditionally brought together policymakers, practitioners, and researchers working on sexual reproductive health and rights, gender equality, and women's empowerment in international development. And the focus of this event, like the session today, really lies on the work of young professionals under the age of 35 years who have conducted research as part of a master program, postgraduate degree, research internship, or a research consultancy. And last year we had a lot of positive feedback about the greater online accessibility to knowledge exchange because we moved, thanks to the pandemic, to an online setting of this event. But we also aimed to create a more festive culmination of 10 years organizing this Linking Research, Policy and Practice conference, which now results in the first international edition taking place today, where we link young researchers, not only those who studied in the Netherlands, like in the years before, but from all different countries, really, and especially with a focus on our SN-INT country hub context. So we have SN-INT hubs in Bangladesh, Burkina Faso, Burundi, Colombia, Ethiopia, Jordan, and the Netherlands. But we also have a lot of international members, and we want to connect more with the wider community working on these topics. So yeah, with this really extended warm welcome to all of you who are here today. I see a great body of knowledge in the room, such interesting people joining us. Thank you for introducing yourselves in the chat. And maybe some of you have already managed to join our earlier sessions and the earlier online networking today, but we also will have a second chance later today to continue this exchange and to get to know you and the participants better. So yeah, please stick around. And for the time being of this session, use the chat actively. I see you're already doing that. And let's use it to comment along and to ask our questions later. Our program for today foresees the key findings and recommendations for policy and practice of 3 highly promising research projects focusing on the context of Mexico, Nigeria, and Ecuador. And they were selected by our SN-INT International Selection Committee. So there were different selection committees for the different conference sessions, but the international submissions were reviewed and selected by Dr. Priyanka Kocher, Dino Abdella, and Siane Anile, all SN-INT International members. And on this note, we want to thank you so much. Maybe some of you are in the room today. I want to thank them for their time and thoughtful revision of the applications. After these 3 presentations, I'll hand over the word to our expert discussant with us, and I'll introduce her better in a little bit. But let me just say, I'm very, very honored and happy that Arushi Singh from the UNESCO Paris office is with us, and she will give feedback to these 3 students afterwards before we open the floor for a discussion with all of you. And there are so many interesting stakeholders working on these topics, working on SRHR and gender broadly, and then especially in the education sector, who are joining us here today. So please also share your knowledge and reflections on the session with us, and we hope that we can close off with a bit of a moderated Q&A/discussion. Yeah, this was everything I wanted to say before we can start with the first presentation, because this is what we're really here for. Our first presenter is Yasser. I have lost my notes. There we go. Yasser Meneses Zepeda. We'll start off with a presentation that is titled "Pregnant, Not a Lost Case: Understanding the Experiences of Women Who Had an Adolescent Pregnancy and Left Their Formal Education in Iztapalapa in Mexico City." With this thesis, Yasser graduated from an Erasmus Mundus Master Program in Education Policies for Global Development, which is a consortium of 3 different universities. We have a pre-recorded presentation from Yasser that we will show you in just a bit. But before that, I would like to hand over the word for you to you, Yasser, so you can shortly introduce yourself and your project.
Thank you, Hannah. Thanks everybody to attend to this important conference about education and sexual and reproductive rights. Shortly and quickly, I consider that this is a very relevant issue to guarantee the right to education to this population, especially in a post-pandemic world, where predictions in Mexico indicate an increase in teenage pregnancies. So I think that is a topic really relevant right now. Always, and would quickly like to thank to ShareNet International to allow me to present the results and the Erasmus Mundus Master Program, and my supervisor, my thesis, Hipatia from the University of Cyprus. I hope that you find interesting the results, and I will be open to any comments and questions. Thanks, Hannah.
Wonderful. I think in just a bit, we'll have your presentation shared. So let's give it a second. But thank you so much for your introductory words, and great to hear that your supervisor is also in the room. Yeah, we just saw it, Victory. Now it has disappeared again. I think it's coming. Yeah, there we go. For me personally, I'm still awaiting the sound. No, we cannot yet hear it. Yeah, thanks for that reminder. Let's try it again. Maybe while we wait, it's always nicer not to wait in silence. Yasser, do you want to say a few words? What motivated you to do this study? How have you come to choose that topic?
Yes, I studied and I was living in Mexico City, and in my last job in the public administration of Mexico City, I was part in an interinstitutional group to prevent teenage pregnancy in Mexico City. So it was really interesting, all the policies that they will design and reevaluate to this population. And the part of education was a really important pillar base in this whole strategy that was just interdisciplinary strategy. So when I started to talk with my supervisor about the topic, I got really interesting about the topic, and I knew some girls that had this experience in their teenagers years. So first, I want to explore more about the Nicaragua situation, because I am from Nicaragua, but it was a little bit complicated because the network that I have in Mexico, it was bigger. So I decided to start in Mexico City, where the data were available. Well, it was a really interesting process, complicated for the COVID situation because I couldn't travel to Mexico City. And well, I can explain later if you want. I think that the presentation is ready.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, we've decided that I will try my luck. So let's see if we can hear your sound with this.
Mexico is the OECD country with the highest number of teenage pregnancies. However, for more than 5 years, the number have been decreasing due to different policies, from sexuality education in the curriculum to reproductive health policies, among others. Despite this good news, what about the teenagers who've had a pregnancy? Little is said about them. I started to wondering what happened with their formal education. The literature establishes that a pregnant adolescent has a high probability of dropping out of school. The literature, especially with quantitative methods, offer different answers. As we can see in these boxes, most of them fall on the adolescent, such as absence due to pregnancy symptoms, the lack of meaning that education has for them, or lack of life projects. This is interesting, and we have to know that unlike other vulnerable or marginalized groups, this population has not occupied a place of political activism in their own constructions, which means that they are largely absent in the discourses that identify them. Therefore, in certain species or documents, we can see an adult-centric or punitive approach referring to them. Therefore, the question guiding the thesis is, what are the main reasons why pregnant teenagers do not continue in formal education? For this, ecological system theory was used. This theory tells us that we cannot understand the decision of these adolescents, in the case of this thesis is dropping out of school, as an isolated phenomenon. Rather, the relationship they have with their environment, close or distant, influences these decisions. The thesis is a qualitative study, since I was interested in knowing from their experience the reasons why they drop out of school. For this purpose, interviews and questionnaires were conducted. The interviews took approximately 30 to 45 minutes and covered the topic of students' background, school and home environment, future plans, and experience in school. Participants were 11 women between 18 and 24 years old who had a pregnancy before the age of 18. The study focuses on the municipality of Iztapalapa in Mexico City. The focus and choice of district was influenced by the fact that it is the municipality with the highest number of adolescents murdered in absolute terms, as well as one of the most socio-economically marginalized municipalities. The results of the interviews not only reflected the obstacles they faced at an early age, but also the areas of opportunity that stakeholders and policymakers have to guarantee a quality education to these adolescents who decide to continue with their teenage pregnancy. Although their stories are different, what they face at an early age is similar: fears, finger pointing, mockery, and harassment. We can see in this table some of the results collect for the collection of for the experience in the interviews. One, for example, of the 11 women interviewed in the sample, 9 say that had not planned their pregnancies and only 2 did. This is why we don't have to say that all teenage pregnancies are unwanted or unplanned. There is some adolescents that plan and want this pregnancy. Other result is none of the adolescent girls lived with their partner or were married before the pregnancy. Only 7 women report having received a sexuality education in their school. As a result of the interviews, it can be inferred that these 11 women did not drop out of school, but were expelled by a society that constructs a negative and one-dimensional idea of pregnant teenagers. Although it may seem that the decision to leave school was theirs, in reality, these adolescents suffer a process of social isolation which finally forced them to deprive themselves of a network of friends, contacts, information, projects, recreational space, and experience other than those at home. I will quote at Alba. They told me that it was better for me to continue from home, and my parents said yes, so I could avoid being mocked by my classmates. It was the easiest. 7 women told me the same story. Principal and teacher recommend them to continue their study at school because one, they can be a bad influence for the peers, and also because it will be easier for them because they will receive a lot of judgment and jokes about the pregnancy. What happened then? Well, the charge of task and uh, homework was so difficult for them that they have to quit about the education because they didn't have any support from the teachers and principals. When we talk about gender roles and stereotypes, it's important to know that one of the environments analyzed by the theory is the macro system, which comprise the dominant social structures, including cultural values, traditions, and beliefs. These informal rules influence how society views teenage mothers. The stigma attached to teenage pregnancy and motherhood is mainly influenced by society's understanding of how teenage girls should behave. Many of these thoughts links to gender roles, prototypes of ideal teenage girls. In the women's stories, the importance of taking care of their babies and putting them at the center of their life stands out. I will quote to Gabi. My dad didn't talk to me. The only thing he told me was that I have to take responsibility because I have decided that. And that's when he told me that why would I continue going to school? Who would look after my son? That I wanted that, now I have to take responsibility. Like Gavi, other women told me the same experience. Now they have the unidimensional role of mother, so they have to follow these roles, and the education is not in this role. These two quotes, are only a sample of this women experience. Discrimination, stigma, gender roles, and stereotypes affected the development of these teenagers and forced them to drop out of school. From phrases like, you were to blame for not taking care of yourself, now you have to take responsibility, to insensitive government scare ads to prevent teen pregnancy, these women told me they fell under continuous attack all their pregnancy. Interviewees agreed that all they wanted was a different look, not be judged, because that was the hardest part of their pregnancy, hearing that they had ruined their lives. In these final reflections, I want to focus on the weight of words. The term self-fulfilling prophecy explains situations in which initial false beliefs become reality. By this, I don't mean that it is false that pregnant teenagers have more difficulties, obstacles than no pregnant teenagers, but that bias can influence and negatively affect more than the pregnancy itself. The concept states that prophecy comes true because of people's psychological response to predictions, fears, insecurities, and concerns associated with the future. The meanings given to the phenomenon by peers, parents, and teachers become predictions. Adolescent girls may feel that their only role is that of mother, so they drop out of school and do not return, which may result in a poor job or the possibility of poverty. Well, at the end, the predictions can come true. Also, something interesting about this experience is and worrisome is that there is not policy of reinsertion of this population or a accompaniment after they leave school. Therefore, the recommendation of this research focuses on two topics. The first one, the importance of education for global citizenship, that is, raising awareness and educating students in values such as respect, tolerance, empathy to build a more inclusive and safe society for all people. The second one is a comprehensive sexuality education and lifelong learning. What do I mean with this? Well, although sexual and reproductive rights education in the classroom is important, this education should be offered to parents, teachers, nurses, community in general, regardless of age, profession, or learning modality, because it is not completely effective to learn about pleasure or affectivity in the classroom if outside your community, your family, your neighbors judge you for exercising your rights or preference. And well, this is my two recommendations. Of course, this is my thesis in a nutshell. I hope you are interested in this topic, and if you are interested in the results of my thesis, you can contact me, or well, you can ask me now if you have any doubt. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wow. Thank you so much, Yasser, for your presentation. And indeed, you did manage to pack a hell of a thesis, if I can say that, in a short presentation, touching upon so many um, topics that deserve our attention today. And as Yasser said, you're free to, and I see some people already reflecting on your presentation in the chat. Please keep those comments coming. Also, please keep your questions coming. You can put them in the chat already and we'll address them here and after having heard from all our presenters today. With that, I will now move on to our second presenter of the day. If it allows me to. Yes. Our second presenter, we're here changing the context quite a bit, moving from Latin America to Nigeria, where we will hear from Aminat Salami, and she will share with us her findings from a study titled "Reaching the Unreached Girls with Comprehensive Sexuality Education Through Digital Platforms Amidst COVID-19." Amidst the COVID-19 pandemic in Oyo State, Nigeria. And that is a research that Aminat conducted with the Society for Family Wealth in Nigeria. Yeah, I think with no further ado, I want to hand over the words to you, Aminat. I think you're here with us, so please feel free to take the floor.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Aminat. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Aminat Salami. I'm a Youth Innovation Officer with 860 Amplify, Society for Family Health, Nigeria. The title of my presentation is Reaching the Unreached Girls with Comprehensive Sexuality Education Through Digital Platform Amidst COVID-19 Pandemic in Oyo State, Nigeria. 860 Amplify project, it's a Society for Family Health project that is being implemented here in Ibadan, Oyo State, Nigeria. Under the project, there is access to modern contraceptives and adolescent sexual reproductive health services to adolescent girls in the community primary health centers close to them. In these facilities, we ensure that adolescents who are close to the facilities have comprehensive knowledge on their sexual health and their reproductive health. During the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a lockdown, and almost everybody was at home. So it was observed that adults of different violence, different abuse in the home, sexual abuse, rape, physical abuse, and it has predisposed most of them to unplanned pregnancy, sexual transmitted infections, including HIV during the lockdown. Approach was actually developed to create a space to access sexual and reproductive health rights. This safe space are virtual platforms, including the Facebook and the WhatsApp. So the study aims to evaluate how to improve access to sexual rights.
Aminat, I'm very sorry to interrupt you.
Adolescent girls during COVID-19 pandemic. In this study, 10 primary health centers Can you?
Aminat, I'm very sorry to interrupt you. That's not very nice. But we're having some connectivity issues. I wanted to suggest that maybe you wanted. Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit for us. So maybe you could turn off your camera for while you're presenting, and we can try if that. Yeah, exactly. Arushi is also.
Hi, can you hear me?
Testing that. Aminat, would you want to try switching off your camera for the part of your presentation? Maybe that will increase connectivity. Shall we try to continue? We might have lost her now, I'm afraid. Let's give it a second. Maybe she can come back. Yeah. Things that can happen in times of online get-togethers, but let's see. I'm positive we can get Aminat back and try again. Yeah, I would also want to hear what word challenges encountered. Yeah, feel free to already put some things into the chat. I would also suggest if Aminat cannot return within the next few seconds, that maybe we have to move on in the meantime to the next presenter. So, Hipatia, si estás dispuesta para presentar, quizás podemos continuar contigo. Yeah, shall we do that? And maybe then we can stop screen sharing for a bit and we'll just swap the program around. Apologies for. Yeah, I will be changing to Spanish now. So make sure you have your interpretation set to the language you want to continue hearing. Pues es mi placer presentar a nuestra tercera oradora, Hipatia Fernanda Vega Lemas de Ecuador, y ella compartirá con nosotros sus hallazgos de investigación sobre las experiencias de jóvenes con identidad sexogenérica diversa durante su tránsito por el sistema educativo ecuatoriano heteronormado. Entonces, con esto viajamos de regreso a otro contexto latinoamericano y vamos a profundizar nuestra comprensión académica sobre las experiencias de las personas jóvenes LGBTI en Ecuador. Les deseo una experiencia de aprendizaje enriquecedora y Hipatia, te toca a ti.
Muchas gracias, Hanna. Voy a compartirles la presentación. Podemos mirar ahora. ¿Dónde está? Ahí, ¿se puede visualizar?
Muy bien, gracias, sí.
Gracias también. Buen día con todos, todas, todes. Un gusto, soy Hipatia. Mi investigación desarrollada como parte de la maestría de Género y Desarrollo en la Facultad Latinoamericana de Ciencias Sociales Flaxo, Ecuador. Trabajé con experiencias de jóvenes con identidades sexogenéricas diversas durante su tránsito por el sistema educativo ecuatoriano.
Aminat, I'm using a colleague's phone.
Bueno, para hablarles
un momentito, Hipatia. Aminat, we have changed the order of presentations because we weren't sure you would return. So if it's okay, we continue with Hipatia, and afterwards we hear from you the full presentation. Is that okay? Yeah? Okay. Pues continúa, Hipatia. Gracias.
Gracias.
Can you hear me? This is Aminat. I'm using a colleague's phone.
Aminat, we're continuing quickly with the other presentation, and we'll return to you afterwards, if that's okay. Yeah? Thank you, Aminat. We'll get back to your presentation in a minute.
Gracias. Bueno, para continuar, como les comentaba, mi investigación se centra acá en Ecuador. Para contextualizarles, en el Ecuador, bueno, a nivel general, en 1974, la Asociación Americana de Psiquiatría deja de considerar a la homosexualidad como un trastorno. En el 91, la Organización Mundial de la Salud deja de considerarla una enfermedad. Para 1997, el Ecuador despenaliza la homosexualidad y en la Constitución del 98 se empieza a hablar por primera vez de los derechos sexuales y reproductivos. A partir del 98, acá hemos tenido 4 estrategias distintas de educación sexual. En la última década, 3 de estas estrategias. Una primera que es llamada el ENIPLA. Esta buscaba sensibilizar, se hicieron varias campañas de prevención de embarazos en adolescentes, se distribuyeron métodos anticonceptivos, hubo una relación entre el Ministerio de Educación y el Ministerio de Salud. Sin embargo, esta estrategia duró 4 años y luego se suplantó por la estrategia conocida como el Plan Familia, que lideraba una persona representante del Opus Dei. Es decir, y se cambió también todas estas campañas de socialización de derechos sexuales y reproductivos y de métodos anticonceptivos, y el método que promovía el Estado fue la abstinencia. Para este entonces, el Ecuador alcanza el segundo lugar en embarazos de la tasa de índices de embarazo en adolescentes. Con toda esta problemática de embarazo en adolescentes en la región, como veíamos también en la presentación de Yasser, el Ecuador para el 2020 hace un recorte del 100% de los recursos destinados para la educación sexual. En el Ecuador tenemos una concepción de educación sexual únicamente para la reproducción. Esta concepción o esta sexualidad no incluye un abordaje integral y mucho menos cuenta con políticas y programas que incluyan a las diversidades sexogenéricas en las instituciones educativas. Estudios señalan que 1 de cada 5 estudiantes han sido víctimas de violencia por su identidad de género y orientación sexual. Existe un alto porcentaje de deserción escolar por causa de la discriminación y la exclusión de niños, niñas y adolescentes con diversidades sexuales. Personas LGTBIQ tienen mayor riesgo de suicidio en entornos de violencia. En el Ecuador continúan existiendo clínicas que ofertan terapias de conversión o deshomosexualización, a pesar de que ya no está permitido, continúan existiendo. Esta es una fotografía de la ciudad de Ibarra, donde vivo. Es un consultorio psicológico que ofrece terapias para trastornos y en ellos incluye identidad sexual, ansiedad, sueño. La metodología de investigación que apliqué es una metodología cualitativa con entrevistas a profundidad, revisión documental, grupos de discusión. En mi investigación también uso un lenguaje inclusivo y la voz narrativa del primero del singular como un aspecto político de apropiación de nuestros trabajos, sobre todo la importancia de los estudios de género y las diversidades sexogenéricas. Dentro de los hallazgos de investigación, en cuanto a la revisión documental, el sistema educativo cuenta con su material pedagógico, que son los textos de ciencias naturales, que es el único material en donde se aborda la sexualidad. Una sexualidad que se lo aborda desde el esencialismo biológico, se habla únicamente del aparato reproductivo masculino, femenino, y podemos observar, estas son dos imágenes, parte de los textos escolares, que aparte no es que incluye desde la educación inicial hasta el bachillerato, solamente incluye desde el 5º al 8º año de básica una sección que se lo dedica al tema de reproducción, y podemos mirar cómo también se reproducen los roles y los estereotipos de género, asignando el rosa para hablar de las características femeninas o el azul de las masculinas. Como conclusiones, podemos señalar que tanto la familia y el sistema educativo actúan como instancias de control, de regulación y disciplinamiento de los cuerpos y de la sexualidad. Muchos entornos familiares fueron quienes generaron rechazo, violencia y vulneración frente a la construcción de una sexualidad no binaria, autorizando y legitimando incluso el internamiento en clínicas de deshomosexualización. También en estas entrevistas, la mayoría de los jóvenes entrevistados tuvieron que experimentar la expulsión de casa a temprana edad cuando sus padres y sus familias conocieron acerca de su sexualidad. Y sobre todo la instauración de memorias de violencia. El Ecuador mantiene una concepción moral en la política de perpetuar la heterosexualidad y la sexualidad para la reproducción. La falta de políticas públicas en educación sexual integral hace que las y los jóvenes acudan a la pornografía como primera fuente de acceso a la sexualidad. Y sobre todo en la pornografía homosexual, es una pornografía que nos vende el sexo sin protección, siendo así enfermedades como el VIH de las primeras causas de muerte de la comunidad LGTBIQ. Es decir, ahí vemos que hay una responsabilidad del Estado directa que frente a la falta de políticas y programas en una educación integral hace que estos jóvenes adolescentes acudan a otras fuentes. Y bueno, es un tema de educación, pero también de salud pública. El bullying que enfrentan las personas con sexualidades diversas en el sistema educativo conlleva a que presenten problemas de salud mental y emocional. La mayoría de los y las entrevistadas tuvieron intentos autolíticos debido al rechazo y a la discriminación. En cuanto a docentes y a las instituciones educativas, estas no cuentan con capacitación constante sobre el abordaje en diversidades sexuales, ni rutas de intervención frente al bullying. Han sido organismos internacionales y organizaciones de la sociedad civil quienes desde su accionar promueven campañas y programas de sensibilización acerca de la prevención del embarazo en adolescentes y las enfermedades de transmisión sexual. Vemos también que en la región hay un crecimiento de los movimientos, de estos movimientos antiderechos que están liderados por el conservadurismo religioso. En el 2017 hubo un intento de hacer una reforma al pensum curricular, a la malla curricular del sistema educativo desde una perspectiva de género. Y ahí lanzaron una campaña llamada "Con mis hijos no te metas". Fue tan fuerte esta presión que el proyecto de la Asamblea quedó rechazado, ¿no?, de incluir una perspectiva de género. Considero que con mi investigación aportamos a la academia desde el visibilizar la discriminación y la desigualdad de género en los espacios educativos, el tomar posturas críticas y de reflexión, acción desde lo académico, pero también desde lo cotidiano. La importancia de incluir una perspectiva de género y de diversidades sexogenéricas tanto en las mallas curriculares como en las políticas públicas y en los programas de educación sexual integral. Y no solo quedarnos en el análisis y en la interpretación de la información, sino también proponer información transformadora. Como recomendaciones para la política pública, podemos señalar que es el trabajar por una educación sexual integral con una perspectiva de género, inclusión de las diversidades sexogenéricas, el reformular el material pedagógico usado para el abordaje de la sexualidad en el sistema educativo, construir rutas y protocolos de intervención frente a casos de bullying por diversidad sexual, generar espacios de discusión y encuentro que recoja la voz y la participación de todos los actores que deben involucrarse en la formulación de políticas públicas para la educación sexual integral, revertir al sistema educativo heteronormado y como un espacio de control y disciplinamiento a un espacio de liberación, descubrimiento y transformación. Actuar desde la interinstitucionalidad para así lograr una integralidad en las políticas públicas, como por ejemplo acuerdos entre el Ministerio de Salud y de Educación. Visibilizar a la educación sexual integral no como un instrumento del Estado, sino como un derecho ciudadano de todas y todos. Finalmente, quiero concluir con una frase de un poeta chileno, Pedro Lemebel. Él señala que hay tantos niños que nacen con una alita rota y merecen un pedazo de cielo para que puedan volar. Mantengo y comparto la utopía del Lemebel de que todos, todas y todes, esos niños, niñas, niñas puedan volar, volar libres de estereotipos y prejuicios y no en un pedazo de cielo, sino en el cielo entero. Gracias. Estoy igual en la sección de las preguntas, atenta a cualquier duda y nada, muchas gracias y sobre todo gracias por permitirme hacer la presentación en español.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Hipatia, for your presentation and for stepping in and for leaving us with this very suitable, nice quote at the end of your presentation. We'll be able to come back to you in a minute when Arushi will give you her comment and we can take some questions from the audience. But before we have a third presentation, we're running a bit behind time, so I'll immediately move on, but take the chance that I get to introduce Aminat a second time because I'm very sorry we had a typo on the introduction of the affiliated organization. Obviously, it's the Society for Family Health that Aminat worked with. Aminat, let's try again. And I hope we can hear you well now. Over to you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Okay. I'm Aminat Salami. I'm a Youth Innovation Officer from Society for Family Health Nigeria. The title of my presentation is Reaching the Unreached Girls with Comprehensive Sexuality Education through Digital Platform amidst COVID-19 pandemic in Oyo State, Nigeria. A 360 Amplify project is implemented by Society for Family Health in Ibadan, Oyo State, Nigeria. It's a project that provides access to modern contraceptives and adolescent sexual reproductive services to adolescent girls in the communities. These services are provided in community primary health centers close to the girls. It was observed during the COVID-19 lockdown that adolescent girls and some other vulnerable groups were victims of different abuses, different sexual abuse, different forms of physical violences that led to unplanned pregnancy, transmission of sexually transmitted infections, especially HIV, and all of that during the lockdown. So it was observed that if we are going to be helping these girls, we should be able to do something that is going to acknowledge their presence in their community and also for something they can leverage on. So an hands-on approach on a virtual space, a digital platform where girls can communicate and girls can access sexual reproductive health services. We implemented Facebook and WhatsApp, and the aim of this study is to evaluate how to improve the access to sexual and reproductive health services among adolescent girls during COVID-19 pandemic. The methodology employed involved 10 primary health centers in Ibadan, whereby adolescent girls can access and engage themselves in sexual and reproductive health services and activities. Also, WhatsApp platforms were created for each of the 10 primary health centers where trained young providers register these girls and on a weekly basis hold classes with the girls involved in spike talks ranging from topics of self-esteem, sexual and reproductive health, pregnancy, negotiation skills, communication skills, and the likes. They also include a method talk, which is different types of modern contraceptives and the girls' voluntariness in taking the methods. We also ensure the use of walking referrals, whereby during the virtual space, if a girl is unable to, if a girl's need is unable to be met, she eventually goes into the facility to seek counseling services and other ASRA services from the health provider. From the results, 184 girls were registered under this program across the 10 WhatsApp groups from May 2021 to July 2021. 36 sessions were held weekly, with 53 girls registered to the facility for ASRA services. So that means that at the end of all these classes, 53 girls were able to be redeemed at the facility level for counseling services. So despite phone ownership being found to be low among girls, as well as complaints of having mobile subscription, sexual and reproductive health services were provided to girls virtually, and girls' unmet needs were also satisfied with the observance of COVID-19 protocols in the on-site facilities. Conclusively, more studies need to be conducted to foster reaching the unreached girls, especially those who do not own a phone. Likewise, the incidence of COVID-19 should be maximized in supporting our girls in achieving their sexual and reproductive health and rights. We should all come out together and advocate for the girls and ensure that our voices are being heard. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Aminat, for summing up your findings and your project in such a comprehensive way, and we were able to follow very clearly now, so that's great. Yeah, we're also very curious to hear what the audience thought of our three presenters, so you are very much invited to already leave us your impression or a comment, a question in the chat. But before that, let me introduce you to our expert discussant of today, Arushi Singh, who is working in UNESCO's section of health and education on comprehensive sexuality education. And there she's examining best practices on building support for CSE, fostering a global community of practice on CSE, and advancing the research agenda on these matters. Previously, she worked as a consultant as well for the IPPF South Asia Regional Office, for Amnesty International's India Office, and the Commonwealth Youth Program at the Asia Center. Yeah, we are very, very curious to hear how these three presentations resonated with you, Arushi, and just handing over the word to you, and thank you for providing some feedback here to get us started on this discussion. Yeah, hi Arushi.
Hi, thank you, Hannah, and thank you to the three speakers, the three presenters. These have been very, very interesting and exciting presentations. I think the research, there's sort of a common thread in the three research projects, which is really about questioning our assumptions about adolescence and adolescent sexuality and young people's agency, young women's agency, young trans persons' agency, and how we tend to sort of problematize it and approach it from a very public health perspective, whereas in fact, what we are talking about are people's real lives, which are, messy and not linear, and also involve a certain level of decision-making of the young person themselves, a little bit like what Yasser explained from his presentation in Mexico, where some of the young girls actually had planned and wanted pregnancies. And, this is just something so difficult for adults, especially decision-making adults, to get their heads around. And it's the same sort of thing for young people who identify as trans or, of different diverse sexual orientations and gender identities, as we heard from Ecuador. And also, within lockdown situations where, in fact, you would think the usual kind of impression is that the home is the safest place, but in fact, we know for girls and young women, actually, homes are not so safe at all. And when they are sort of forced into a situation where they have to stay at home, it can become actually more dangerous for them. So we need to put in place measures that enable young people's, young women's, marginalized young people's agency. We need to put in place measures that enable a better understanding. So, all of the sort of social structures that were highlighted by all three presentations are, in fact, the fact that the young girls are facing mockery and harassment, or sort of being forced to drop out of school in Mexico, or the issues represented in Ecuador, and that young girls are seeking SRH services in Nigeria and require the counseling and are looking for it and are able to access it, of course, through the excellent project that Aminat shared, speaks to the fact that more and more this needs to be scaled up. There is, of course, a case for ministries of education, if they really want to achieve the SDG 4 in education, to create safe and inclusive learning environments. And I think the recommendations from all three presentations speak to that, and we need to put in place environments that are safe for everybody, for diverse learners, for young girls who might be pregnant, and as well as making sure that it's not just the schools that are safe environments, but then engaging with communities, putting in place policies, training teachers, ensuring that these social issues are actually social issues. These are not the problems of the young people themselves, right? It's a social concern. And so I think it's important to also focus on that. And there's definitely the other aspect is to have intersectoral collaboration, where ministries of education need to work together with ministries of health, of gender, of Ministry of Youth, in some countries, Ministry of Religious Affairs, to really help to create this safe, supportive learning environment. So it's not just about providing good quality, comprehensive sexuality education. That case has already been made through the three presentations, and we have the evidence on that, but it's really also about ensuring that this sexuality education is provided in an environment that is supportive, that is, and sort of enabling for young people, for especially marginalized young people, and that we ensure that services continue to be delivered and linked in with both the education, but also in situations like lockdown, when you don't have access to the education system necessarily, or certainly young girls and women have less access to online ways of accessing services, information, and education. So I think that's just my very sort of brief understanding and summary and ideas on how we could use the information coming out of these three excellent presentations, great pieces of research that are also questioning the patriarchy. And I'd like to hear from other participants, perhaps, of their questions and interest in these. Thank you, Hannah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Arushi. Also wanted to give the space to our speakers. If you wanted to react at this moment, then please feel free to unmute yourself. And in the meantime, we're waiting also. If people from the audience want to step in, you can raise your hand if you want to also speak up and join the conversation, or share via the chat if that feels more comfortable for you. But yeah, Aminat, Hipatia, and Yasser, would you like to react to what Arushi had to say about your work?
Sorry, can I?
Yeah, please, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comments, Arushi. Yes, I completely believe that it's not only about the ministerial, for example, to deliver or design these policies, because it's not only a public health, it's a social and multi-causal problems, the teenage pregnancy. For example, in Mexico City, they have a really new and really important policies, and it's an institutional efforts to prevent that. But the thing is that the strategy is really good. The numbers are decreasing, but what is happening with the girls that already have a pregnancy? And that is interesting because it's not many studies, there is not many policies. For example, I only found one program that is a scholarship, but the 11 women tell me, when I have to do all the process, all the documents, it was impossible. It was impossible. And when I can meet all the requirements, I have 19 years old, so I was not part of the, I cannot be part of the program. So yeah, it was really interesting and complicated to see that. And it was not like, for example, the 11 women told me that they have to, I don't know how to say in English, but it's baja eventual. They have to drop out, and the only question that they have to answer to the principals or to the administrative people is why you want to drop out the school. Some people, some women said the pregnancy, others were ashamed to say it, but when they say pregnancy, it's okay, you have your documents, and there is not following or a policy to keep and to stay these people in education, these girls in education. So it was really, yes, worrisome about it. But yes, I am agree with you that this interinstitutional, interdisciplinary efforts to get these results and guarantee the right of education. And thank you for your comment.
Hipatia, Aminat, would you also like to react before we take it forward?
Sí, muchas gracias, Hannah. Gracias, Arushi, por también sus comentarios. Y sí, es interesante mirar, como nos dice Yasser, ¿no? Más allá de este ejercicio interinstitucional, cuando hacía las entrevistas también a estos jóvenes con sexualidades diversas, ellos señalaban la importancia de la acogida en sus familias, ¿no? Porque son sus familias, en este caso, las primeras instancias vulneradoras. Entonces, creo que es un trabajo bastante integral, ¿no? También desde la sociedad, y me parece súper lindo mirar cómo en mi país, sobre todo, por ejemplo, antes no se hablaban de derechos sexuales y reproductivos. Después empezamos un poco a hablar de derechos sexuales y reproductivos. Ahora estamos hablando de esta educación sexual para la integralidad, que no únicamente es para la reproducción. Entonces, más bien, gracias por estas iniciativas también de generar estos espacios y de seguir, de ir posicionando también la temática de los derechos sexuales y reproductivos y de la salud sexual integral en los países, en todos los países en realidad, no solo en países como nuestra región Latinoamérica, que tenemos alta tasa de embarazos en adolescentes o de discriminación por diversidades sexogenéricas.
Thank you, Hipatia. And I do see a related comment / question in the chat. Maybe we can address that, because I think it's a very good one, Arushi, if I interpret it rightly. Like, how do you advocate? How do you guarantee? How do you implement CAC in places where maybe the legislative policy situation isn't very favorable? Do you want to say a few words about that?
Oh, thank you. In fact, UNESCO has just released the global status on CAC report, which has looked at sort of global policies, laws, and implementation status of comprehensive sexuality education. And we found that while there is actually a large number of countries around the world that do have a positive policy environment for providing comprehensive sexuality education, implementation tends to be uneven. And I think it's important to recognize that every country and every context needs to be on a journey to the sort of to comprehensive sexuality education. It's not sort of a state that you arrive at, suddenly, and everyone's getting CSE and we have a perfect curriculum and all of that. So I think every context and every country is on that journey in some way or the other. Of course, there are contexts where, in fact, the environments tend to be more restrictive than positive. And I think one of the key things to remember and think about in those situations is really, while we are raising the evidence, like through such research, and providing the stories of the impact of the lack of comprehensive sexuality education and positive, safe, and inclusive learning environments, we also need to speak about the need for this education with the value system of the people we're trying to convince, which means that we need to speak about inclusion, dignity, and respect, for example. So it's not just about saying, this is sort of the human right of every individual to get education, which it is. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything to a lot of people who are in decision-making spaces. And so how do we speak to them in a language that really makes them understand and convinces them about the need for talking about sexuality education, and not necessarily calling it even sexuality education. It could be called family life education, reproductive health education. Every context and every language will have its own name and sort of related terminology for this. And I think we need to be quite contextual. We need to understand the context. We need to understand our target audience and really present it in a way that resonates with them. That's a very short answer for a very complicated situation.
I tried to put the link in the chat of the global status reports that you're mentioning. I'm not sure if the Spanish version is already available, but probably will be soon.
It will be soon, yeah.
All right. But thank you for that answer, Arushi. Yeah. Are there more questions or comments from the audience? We have many people probably interested in or working on CSE in the room. So feel free to raise your hand, join our conversation, or ask your question in the chat. I have some questions to you as well, if I may. In the meantime, as I don't see anything coming in, it's we've been talking a lot about what all these stakeholders can do, and you've given some very interesting recommendations, which basically also show how complex it is and how much of a multi-level stakeholder and intersectional approach there is necessary. But looking at Hipatia, Aminat, and Yasser, who have just researched on that topic, and I know we also have students in the room, I also find it very interesting to hear what were the gaps in terms of, like, if you were to do another follow-up project on your research, did you identify topics or research questions that you would want to sort of hand over or suggest to the next generation master students that is maybe in the room? Maybe we can do, if you want to share something on that, and then I see Putri would want to raise a question as well. But yeah, just curious if there were any recommendations for further research from your sites. Would someone like to respond to that question? You don't have to, of course.
Hannah, ¿puedo responder?
Yeah,
sí,
por favor.
También hay una pregunta de Putri o un comentario de Putri. Bueno, respecto a lo que señalabas, como parte del trabajo, si bien es necesario, yo apuesto mucho a la importancia de la organización social, de la movilización social, porque los derechos no han sido dádivas otorgadas por los estados, sino han sido producto de la lucha y de esta conquista de derechos por las organizaciones, por los movimientos sociales. Entonces creo que es muy importante articular y no dejar de lado la investigación de la academia con lo que pasa en las calles. De hecho, yo siento que hay una responsabilidad ética de nuestra parte de devolver la información a las organizaciones, de devolver la información a la gente con quien estamos trabajando, porque de hecho no es solo nuestro trabajo, es gracias a ellos o a ellas. De hecho, con el grupo de jóvenes, con quienes gentilmente me compartieron sus experiencias, estamos ahora trabajando queremos hacer una especie de fanzine de fácil reproducción para fotocopiarlo, y estamos esperando un poco que el Ecuador, acá estamos en que ya tal vez posiblemente para enero retornemos a clases presenciales. Todo este tiempo hemos estado desde la virtualidad, bueno, los colegios, y irlo a distribuir como afuera de las instituciones educativas. En la ciudad donde yo vivo existen, por ejemplo, 2 colectivos de diversidades sexogenéricas. La intención es poner, por ejemplo, esta información ahí con el contacto de estos colectivos, poner información ahí de, por ejemplo, los chicos decían, a mí me hubiera gustado saber que el hecho de que me guste otra mujer no significa que soy pecadora o que es algo anormal. Me hubiera gustado saber que hay muchos más jóvenes también que sentimos lo mismo, o me hubiera gustado saber cómo es la primera relación sexual entre hombres. Entonces queríamos hacer como un material un poco, aterrizar este lenguaje más académico a un lenguaje más coloquial y sobre todo devolver la información, ¿no? Porque de nada nos sirve que tal vez nuestras investigaciones, sí, qué lindas, por ahí medio lo presentamos en algún espacio y quedan en los repositorios. Entonces, mirar esa importancia de, una, devolver la información a las organizaciones, y la otra, seguir trabajando desde la importancia de la presión para generar políticas públicas.
Very powerful words, and I couldn't agree more, Hipatia. That is so true, and to a little degree also what we're trying to do with a conference like this, to break out a little bit of the academic bubble and at least start talking to other stakeholders. But also I really hear you in terms of like the methods that you use and whom you research, and not to forget the very community level happenings on the ground that are so valuable. Thank you so much for your response, Hipatia. I will hand over the word to Putri, who I see has the hand up. Feel free to voice your question directly, Putri.
Yeah, I just have a question and a reflection for Yasser's research, but also for Hipatia's and maybe just for everyone. So in Indonesia, we also face the same situation. We have a lot of cases where pregnant girls are kicked out of school. And as you said, we also have cases where the parents themselves and the family actually retracted them from school. But in our country, there's also a tendency from schools to actually kind of like push the students out of school, usually in the name of the good name of the school, because they want to preserve some sort of like good whatever for the school themselves. And I just would like to ask if that tendency is also happening in Mexico City, and what kind of policy or approach is being used to tackle that at the moment. And regarding the sexual education itself, something that's quite similar in my own research is that I found that, for example, there are efforts to, for example, making inclusive guidelines for sexuality education, various guidelines from various usually private stakeholders or even public-private partnership. But the problem is how to implement this guideline into the policy itself. So I found that, for example, the language in the guideline, they really try to be inclusive or to be like lessening the biases, but when it's translated into the policy documents, the language change. So yeah, this is one of the problems. I don't even know the answer, but just would like to reflect on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Putri. Putri has also been presenting already earlier today in one of our sessions. So thank you for addressing this. I don't know if any of our speakers here would like to react to that or respond to that.
Maybe I can start. Hipatia is agree. Thank you for your question. Yes, it's similar in the case. I mean, my thesis I started this saying that it's a topic that we cannot generalize. Even with my methods that I use. That is, I am only one to know the experience of this 11 woman. But it's interesting that from 11, for example, it was 8, I think, that the number that told me these stories that happen also in your country, but it's like a discrimination, not so explicit. Is this part that for your safety, it's better that you continue your studies at home. Why? First, because as you told, the reputation of the school, no, is teenage pregnancy can be a pandemic for them. This is one. The second is, I mean, it's contagious, no? If you see some teenage pregnant, the other want to be like them, something in their hair is like that. And the other one is the infrastructure of the school is dangerous for the complication that you will have. And interesting is that it, I mean, I repeat, of course, there are studies that say that it's complicated for more than people less than 14 years old, but of these 11 women, only one has a complication in their pregnancy. And she told me that the professor said that the stairs in the school is not safe for them, so it's better to continue at home. And she told me, I mean, in a funny way, I mean, I have a teacher of 70 years old, and it's more dangerous for her than for me. And she said, I could go to the school until my 7th month because I was really good, but that was the option. No, it's safe for you, it's for your safe. But when they go to the school, when they continue the studies at home, it was complicated because it was not a tutoring, a mentorship or something that they didn't get support from the teacher or the principal. So they have to do the housework, you know, the cleaning, the cooking, take care of the sister and the brothers. So it's too much. And the judgment, they told me that they have too much at it. So this is why they quitting at the end. They get forced to do it. And about the policies that there are in the city to tackle it is, I mean, in my study, in my literature review, there is none. I mean, there is none because it's not a problem, not because the legally there is not some. I mean, the school cannot expel for a pregnancy, but you know, there is this kind of comments and recommendations that it's better that you continue at home, you know, for your sake. So yeah, it's really complicated to design these policies, because when you go to do the dropout in the administrative section, it's like, oh yeah, or they lie because the judgment or they don't really care and say, okay, have your documents.
Thank you,
I hope you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm feeling terrible to cut this short, and also, Hipatia, if you allow me, because we're really running out of time, we're supposed to round off, but I would really like to have one last question that we could take for Aminat, that I've seen, I hope I pronounced your name right, would like to ask one final question before we have to close to our third speaker. So please, you can unmute yourself if that's possible, and address your question directly. Kofo Vorola, I think you had a question to Aminat. Can we hear that, or would you like to put it in the chat for us? That's a pity. Aminat, was there anything you wanted to add to the discussed? Unfortunately, we didn't give you as much speaking time after your presentation, so please feel free if there are any final words or reflections on the discussed from your side.
Thank you. No, not really, actually. I'm just really grateful for the platform. I'm really thankful to the presenters and to the anchor, you two, the hosts. Thank you very much, Janet. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to present our research findings, and let everybody keep fighting for the adolescent girls. Let us ensure that we advocate for them. We give them a voice to be able to explain their needs and meet their needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aminat. And if we can expand that after what has been said, not only to the girls, to all the young people, right, in all their diversity. But yeah, very much agree with these closing words. Well, because I don't want to still move your time, and because we have another session starting soon, let me just say, hey, if you enjoyed this, if you want to read back some of the findings, and if you want to see them, as also Hipatia pointed out, in another way, in another less academic way, then I have good news for you, because we have this amazing collective Framenti with us here. They were taking some notes, and they will be designing a digital fanzine with beautiful illustrations that will be disseminated with you all in English, French, and Spanish, at the end of the year, early next year.